So here we are for another episode of RC Pit Stop, and today we're in the pits with the Team Magic Seth buggy. Now the last time I ran this car, I ran into a little bit of a problem where the motor overheated and kind of shut down the run a bit early. Now in the comments there was a couple of people that said that maybe it was because I was running a 3.8 inch Badlands. I don't entirely disagree with that. I think there's a very good possibility that that may have been the cause of the overheating, but I really wasn't pushing the car all that hard. I was running it mainly on gravel and short grass. There's really no reason why it should have overheated. I think personally 2200 kV is just too much for the way that this car is set up currently. Stock out of the box without any gear changes on 4S, this thing will do in excess of 90 kilometers an hour, which I think is a bit too much for this type of car and this size of car. Maybe if Team Magic had gone for like a 2000 kV, maybe a 1800 kV, something like that, probably would have been a little bit better, and maybe the final gear ratio of this car might actually be too high as well, because it's not running a very big pinion in there. So it's kind of interesting that this thing is really fast and then it overheated on 6S in my last run. So we're going to be changing out a bunch of things on this car. We're going to be giving it a fresh look, and to kick things off we're going to be swapping out the motor. So the motor that I've chosen has actually been recommended by one of my viewers. This is a rocket motor. It's available through eBay, probably through other outlets as well, but this guy here is a 1650 kV 4092 millimeter size, so quite a big motor. Of course it has the built-in heatsink as well, which is something that the stock one doesn't have, so maybe this is going to work a little bit better. Definitely going to have more torque, won't be as revvy, so who knows, maybe I'll need to gear up a little bit, or given how fast this car already is, I think the gear ratio might actually just be just right for this particular motor. Now we're going to be changing out the color of the body as well. When I unboxed this car, I also showed that it is available in a green color. Team Magic were kind enough to send out one of these bodies, as well as the shock socks that go, to the matching body. So I'll be swapping this out to green. And I think that's a good opportunity to do this now, since the red body on the channel will kind of signify the stock car, and then when you see the green body, you know that it's been modified and it's got a different motor in it and so forth. Now along with that, we're going to be changing out a whole bunch of other upgrades on this car as well. First and foremost, I was running an AVC receiver on that last run just to try things out, but to be honest, it really wasn't working too well for me. So we're going to be swapping that out. I'm going to put a Futaba receiver in there. Not really an upgrade, just a bit of a change, because I don't want to really have the gyro interfering with my driving. Now, one of the upgrades that Team Magic sent out are, of course, these Aluminium Shocks. These look absolutely fantastic, and you do have to build them, so you can tune them to however you like. These will be a really nice addition to the car. Over here we also have a whole bunch of hinge pin braces. So there's front and rear and front. Anyway, they're going to get swapped out as well. We also have some new shock towers, so front and rear shock towers. These are really nice. Like a lot of the Team Magic aluminium upgrades, they've all got this bevel finish to them. They just look fantastic, like really nice upgrades. And then of course you've got some metal standoffs as well, because I think the stock ones are plastic. Those are for the shocks. And then we have some steering components here. We have the rear hub carrier, we have a steering block, we have the pivot ball screws, and we have another steering block. This is for the front. These are both for the fronts. I think there's more like caster blocks really, but I think you need these screws for these type of caster blocks, because with the plastic ones, they kind of have a lip on both sides, and this one only has it on one side, so you kind of need the screws to be able to fit them on. We'll talk about that once I install it, of course, but from what I can see, I think that's what you need to do. We've also got some captured hinge pins. Now I think that's what you call them, because these have got the little locking nuts on the end. The stock hinge pins on this just have the little E-clips, which can be annoying, especially if they fall out. And then we've got a couple more bits here. So we have the front upper arm mount. That guy fits right up here. We'll get to that, and I'll show you when I install this guy what that does. Of course, got a little bit of aluminium in there, a bit of bling. We have a lightened CNC machined 46 tooth main spur gear, so we'll be changing that out. And then of course we also have a sliding motor mount, because the stock motor mount is not sliding. Well, I mean, you can adjust it, but you kind of have to take the mount out. Anyway, it's like the old Armour motor mounts, if you remember what those are like. And then last but not least, we have the front and rear aluminium chassis braces. Now, the rear chassis brace on this is aluminium, but it's that stamped soft aluminium. This is obviously CNC machined, 775, should add quite a fair bit of stiffness. And the front one is plastic, so now that's going to be aluminium as well. And that's pretty much it for now, except we do have a new set of 3.8-inch Badlands. I was using 3.8-inch Badlands on this car previously, you know, in the last run, but they were kind of borrowed. Those tires are a bit old, and since I'm going to be changing out so much on this car, it's going to have a brand new look. I figured, hey, let's do a brand new set of tires. This will be a very long RC pit stop video, I think, because there's quite a lot that I need to get through, and I'm going to stop yapping and start working. Okay, so just a quick progress update. I've changed out my receiver just temporarily. I've also removed this receiver box because I need to get access to the front chassis brace to replace that. And just an interesting point here, I really like the way that this slots in. It's kind of like a dovetail joint, so that kind of slots in there like so, and there's two screws that hold it in place. And it's really nice and sturdy, but of course I need to kind of move it out of the way temporarily while I change out this front end of the car. You can see that I've already got my motor mount on there. It looks fantastic, and of course my rear chassis brace. Interesting thing about the rear chassis brace, it's actually longer than the old one by quite a fair bit, and I was a little bit worried because, oh geez, I thought maybe Team Magic sent me out the wrong brace, but not at all. The original brace mounts on this hole here and this one here, and the new one, as you can see, mounts in the two forward holes. So very interesting change there. I'll be curious to see how that holds up in the long run. My next step here, whilst I've got everything out of the way, I'm going to be changing out the bullets on the ESC as well as the motor because they don't actually match. I've got these, I think these are like 5mm bullets, which will work quite well here, and I think that'll be plenty for this car. I've also changed out my spur gear, so that's now all installed. I've put a couple of dabs of 500 weight defoil in there as well, just to top it up, because it did feel a little bit light. So hopefully that will work out well in the end. And then yeah, I'll start working on the front end of this and changing everything out, and I'll give you guys an update before we actually start on the shocks. Okay, so I'm updating you here again because I finished putting the bullets on the ESC, and I also did my motor as well, which is just over there in the corner. But I've hit a bit of a snag with the front end here. As you can see, I've removed the entire front section of the car because I'm trying to replace this one upgrade part that has this aluminium piece here. And I thought I could do a bit of a stage here and then move on to the next section. But I need to tell you about this because this is, I think, going to catch a lot of people out. So to remove this part, there are two screws here that go straight onto the front chassis brace. There are two more that screw straight onto the top of the bulkhead underneath here. But then this still doesn't come out. It doesn't come out because there are two more screws just here that are buried underneath the actual diff. If my camera would focus on here, that's great. So there's one there and there's another one on that side. And the only way to get to those screws is to remove the entire front end and of course take out the A-arms. The lower A-arms need to come out for you to access those screws. So whilst I'm doing this, I'm going to replace my hinge pin braces, whichever ones I've got that actually fit on here. I'll be replacing those. And then of course we'll move on to the shock tower. I'll need to remove that as well because I'll have all of this out of the way, so I may as well do the shock tower. And then I'll do the shocks and the steering knuckles and everything else that you've got here. So it's quite a big job. It's a big long step, and I kind of wanted to update you on what I'm going to be doing because yeah, it's a little bit annoying. Now I did notice that Team Magic did put a couple of grooves. You can probably see it just there. And you can sort of see it here. It looks like there's like a groove for you to put your tool through and access that screw. But as you can see, that does not go through. And this is an MIP bit. I actually tried with the Huddy bit as well, which is a little bit thinner on this end, and even that won't go through. So a little bit disappointing that I can't take that part out without disassembling the entire front end. But I wanted to update you and let you all know about this because yeah, now I got a fair amount of work to do here at the front, and the next time we come back you'll see a bit of a change. Okay, so time for another update, and I've got my rear hinge pin brace here on the front A-arms. I've got this piece in, I got my front shock tower in as well, and I've put the front bumper back on, and I've also got the hinge pin brace on the front of the A-arms now, and I've done the steering knuckles and everything here. We'll get to this section in a minute. But just an interesting point as well, as I was working on this, I found out that if you just want to swap out this shock tower, you will need to replace, like pull everything apart, because there is a screw also behind this piece that's in the shock tower back here. So in order to take this shock tower out, like to replace the old one, you're going to need to rip everything out to take this piece out so that you can access that screw. And in order to get this piece out, you got to take all the A-arms out. So a little bit of a design flaw, I think. That being said, like the more I work on the car, the more I realize how strong it is and how well built it is. So I'll give props to Team Magic for that, but I don't think anybody thought about like how easy is it to work on these things and how easy is it to access certain components, because to have to dismantle an entire front end of the car just to change out the shock tower, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It should be a bit easier than that. Or maybe we've just been spoiled with some of the other cars and other brands that exist out there that, I don't know, they've just been designed a bit differently. But this thing's pretty tough. Like the way it's designed, it's pretty good. Now, moving on to this section, I've got my machined steering knuckle here, which looks absolutely amazing. Look at that. That is really nicely finished. I really like that compared to the standard one, which just looks like it's pressed and, you know, it looks a little bit soft. And then, of course, you've got this caster block, I think you call them sometimes. A couple of cool features about this. One, these screws, they can back out on you sometimes. And what Team Magic have done, you'll see here, there's a couple of little 1.5 millimeter grub screws that go in and lock these screws into place. So put a little bit of Loctite. I also put some Loctite on this going into the steering knuckle, and just make sure that it's free. So before you do anything, make sure that it's free, because you don't want this binding in any way. It's just going to put more stress on your servo. Now, you'll see that this screw here is sticking up like crazy. There was no other screw supplied for this, and it's kind of a unique size, because I tried to put one of my own screws on here, and it didn't quite work. So yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do here. I may need to just cut this down, and hopefully it will look half decent, because at the moment it looks a bit poxy just sticking out like that. But there's really no other way of doing this. Now, originally I thought that that's what these were for. These little guys here. Come on, camera. There we go. These little guys, I thought that that's what these were for. So I popped out the little pivot ball thing that's in here, took that out and went to put one of these in, and these are way too small. So it doesn't actually lock into place. So I'm assuming that they are for something else. We're yet to discover what they're for. But we'll get to that hopefully, and yeah, we'll see how that turns out. I don't know if this is right. I think it might be pointing down. I may need to go for that inner hole, or the outer hole rather, but we'll see. Once I put it all together, I'll know exactly what's going on, and we'll go from there. So that's what I'm up to at the moment. I'm going to do this section, and then I'm going to move on to the shocks. And as you can see, this has taken up a lot of parts. So there's you know, quite a number of parts just in the front end here. And then eventually we're going to start putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. Alright, so we're making some pretty good progress now. I've fast forwarded a little bit here. We've got the front end already installed. All the bits, shiny bits, good bits are on here. I've built up the shocks. So anyway, I've updated my servo horn as well, because I noticed that the plastic servo horn, every time I locked the servo this way, it was actually, the top here was actually hitting the servo. So I've put a taller servo horn on there, which now gives me full steering, and I've adjusted it so it's nice and centered and everything, and it looks good. It works well. I've got my Futaba receiver installed in there. I've already bound it to my radio and everything, so I've installed the motor. And on 4S, I'll tell you what, this is going to be, I think, under geared. So I'm definitely going to have to go up on a pinion, but I want to run it with the stock pinion, because I want to see what the difference is, and obviously where I'm going to go from there. So we'll run it as it is, and that's pretty much it. I got my front chassis brace in there, and that's pretty much the front end done, and the center part is already all done and installed as well. So the last bit here is, of course, the rear. I did install the rear chassis brace, but to be honest, I'm going to have to take out this bit here and disassemble this entire section to put those hinge pin braces on there, and then of course change out the hubs as well. Would you believe it? We're finally done. We're finally here. The car's ready. and it's you know, good to go. We can go out and bash and see what this thing can do on 4S and 6S with that standard gearing, and of course with now the new motor. Now of course I've got my Badlands mounted on here. There's a 3.8 inch Badlands pre-mounted on Desperado wheels with a 1/2 inch offset. I'll have a link in the video description for you guys to check out. Didn't install the LEDs on the body. I decided not to do that, mainly because I don't do a lot of night driving. And if I want to drive at night, well, I can use the red body. And given that it's going to be dark, no one's going to be able to see that I've got green shock socks with a red body. So I'm not really worried about that. So we're going to take the body off just briefly, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of these upgrades. And I'm going to run you through some of the components here, because of course I had a few drummers. There's a few things here. And then when I put the body back on, we're going to talk about I think a major drummer that I had. So I've shortened these screws here at the front, as you can see. So I just cut them down to size, so that looks a little bit nicer now, a bit neater. And that's pretty much it. So the rear end is actually a lot quicker to do. Obviously you got to remove this rear bumper, but you don't have to pull half of the truck apart to be able to do what I did here. You can see I got my 4S battery in there. I've already tested everything, bound it, and got it all sorted out to make sure that, you know, it was all working 100%. I've done my endpoints on my steering, calibrated my ESC, so the car's all 100% ready to go. Now, when I built my shocks, I used Trackstar 2000 CST shock oil. I originally was doing a little bit of a video showing you how to build these shocks, and I used 2000 in the front and 3000 in the rear. The 3000 in the rear was a bit too stiff. It was just a tad too much. I think 2000 front and rear, and I actually deliberately left a little bit of the 3000 in the rear shocks just to kind of make a little bit, just a slight little bit stiffer than the front. So I'm happy with the way that the suspension feels. The car feels really nice and plush. It's also got plenty of ground clearance now. It feels a little bit more like a monster truggy, really, or a monster buggy, especially, you know, with these big tires. And of course now we're going to be running some big power through this motor. Now, I don't know if this stock gearing is going to be adequate. It might be too slow on 4S with the gearing. I might need to gear this thing up because we've gone to such a low KV. So the motor is nowhere near as revvy as the original motor, but it's going to have a hell of a lot more torque. So I should be able to gear this thing up if I find that 4S is just way too slow. And of course I should have some more usable, pliable power, you know, power that you can actually put to the ground on 6S, as opposed to the craziness that it was originally. And above all, hopefully I won't have a thermal shutdown like I did when I was running this thing on 6S. Now, if you want me to kind of show you how to build these shocks, I may do a separate video for this, because like I said, I did film it, but shocks are shocks. Like with most people, if you've built a couple of shocks, you'll know how these things go together. Now, with the body, I actually came across two problems with this body. The first problem was that I was trying to mount the body onto the car, and I couldn't get the body to sit down at the back. So at the back, I'm going to try and show you this, and I don't know if it's going to come through on camera, but the frame here is not actually at the base of that. It actually sits up. You can see the body posts only stick out a little bit. And the reason for that is because there is a design flaw with these shock towers, these upgraded shock towers. There's a bit of an issue. And I don't know if it's the shock towers or the actual framework of the body that's causing the problem. So this is one of those cases of what came first, the chicken or the egg? Either way, somebody at Team Magic didn't actually test fit this body with these shock towers on here. So here's the problem. I'm going to show you, I'm going to flip this around, I'm going to show you here. You can actually see, because the shock tower, the rear shock tower is so much bigger, so much wider, it's actually hitting these posts here on the frame. So there and there. And it's not allowing the car to sit all the way down to the bottom. So in order for me to have it come through the front here, I can't have it sitting all the way down at the back. So that's one problem. The next problem I had, when I originally mounted the front shocks, I had them, I think second hole in from the end. So that's right, I had them second hole in from the very tip. The problem with that because the shocks are now sitting out wider, so they'll sit out this way, the framework of this body doesn't actually go over the shocks because the shock tower is so much wider. So I was able to kind of mount the body on. Ooh, where's the thing? Here we go. So I was able to push the body down and get it in there, but then to try and get it out, I thought I was going to have to get a crowbar. I couldn't get the body off the car, and I couldn't work out what was jamming it. And I actually widened, I went with the body reamer, I widened the hole here, I widened the hole on the plastic a little bit as well. And I'm thinking maybe it's catching on something on this body post and it's not allowing me to take it out. That wasn't the case at all. What was happening was because these shocks are sitting out so much wider, this framework was actually catching on the shock cap, on the end of the shock cap. So it would spring open and then clamp underneath the shock cap. And then of course you were trying to take the body off and it was getting caught underneath the shock cap, right at the very top of the shock. So this is where I'm sort of a little bit confused as to why this is happening, because I mean obviously, God, I can never get that in there. Here we go. So obviously, you know, the car existed probably before the upgrades, I think, but nobody at Team Magic has actually fitted this body with these upgrades and set up the shocks the way that I wanted to set them up, because I wanted the shocks to stand up a little bit more so that I could raise it up a bit, have a bit more suspension travel, and get a bit more ground clearance. And that's the whole idea, to turn it into a little bit more of a monster trucky. But I can't do that, so I've had to go in, I think, 4th hole in from the end. I'll show you this again. Yeah, so I'm in the 4th hole in. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4th, that's where it's at. And even then, what I did to try and stand the shocks up a bit, I actually moved them inwards 1 hole on the A-arms. And you know, that's about as much as I can do. If I start bringing these shocks out, they're gonna start catching on this frame here. Now, of course, you can Dremel this out, cut the frame out if you want, but then you jeopardize the strength of it. Because getting rid of that little rod there on the cage will clear those those shock bodies. But you know, if you take a big hit on the front, chances are you're probably going to bang up your frame. I don't know. And at the back, well, yes, you can potentially cut out this post, and you can cut out this post so that the shock tower doesn't hit it. But again, if you take a big hit on the wing, what's to say that this won't sort of cave in? If this bit of plastic here was kind of going down on an angle towards the center, then probably it would clear the tips of the shock tower and we would be okay. Now, of course, I'm going to be showing this video to Team Magic, and hopefully they'll give you some kind of an update as to what's going to happen, you know, what their response is going to be. I don't know. And as soon as I have something, I will update the video description. So please be sure to check out the video description. If I have any information, I will put it in there for you guys to have a look at. And you know, you'll have the part numbers for everything that I've used. You'll have links to my social media pages and anything else that I can think of that's relatable to this car. And that is pretty much it. So now we're done with this entire upgrade. Here is the radio that I'm going to be using with this guy now. My Futaba 4PM, an absolutely brilliant radio, going with an absolutely beast of a car now. With, of course, it's got its own little annoyances, but I think over the overall result, I'm pretty happy with it. You know, it's got a couple of little issues as far as the upgrades go, but I'm pretty happy with the overall result, and I'm really dying to see how it's going to handle and how it's going to perform. So the next time there is a nice day, I'm going to go out and run this guy, and keep an eye out, because yeah, I'll upload the running video as soon as I can. That is it from me, guys. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new, and I'll be speaking to you all next time.